Hello everybody, this is Kate at the Library of Whispers, and this is my first soft-spoken voice for a while, since I had tonsillitis, and it left me with a very gruff voice, and I was coughing a lot as well. So I'm going to give this a go today, see how it goes. I have my faithful latte with me. I'm going to take a bit of a sip. This is just a plain one without gingerbread. Although actually I did buy some Bailey's Irish cream latte, which I may try in a different video. It's not alcoholic, so I won't be slurring by the end, but this is just a plain one. So hopefully it will help my voice not give out by the end of the video. So we're going to take a look. Let's move this a bit further back. I've read to you before lots of my tourist guide books from the different places that I've visited over the years, and I came across this one actually, which I'd forgot that I had, so I thought we'd give it a read, have a look through. It is called Pembroke Castle. Here it is, and this is in Wales, and it's the birthplace of the Tudor dynasty, which again I thought was interesting, seeing as I did a video a couple of days ago about Henry VIII in particular, so I thought you might be interested to hear about Pembroke Castle. Right, let's try and get this in the shot. So here we go, a history. As Pembroke Castle is seen looming above the main street of the town, or is viewed across the water from the north or south, one is overwhelmed by its majesty and might. It is indeed one of the largest castles in Wales. With the walled town, it forms one of Britain's most impressive medieval monuments, and the questions are inevitably asked: why was the castle built? What was it for? And who lived there? Pembroke Castle was the centre of government of an important lordship, a fact which is reflected in its size. However, despite appearances, it was not a royal castle but a private possession, the seat of a succession of major barons, all of whom played leading roles in shaping Britain's history. And they built the castle that we see today. Perched on top of a rocky limestone headland, Pembroke Castle casts its shadow down a narrow peninsula which extends east to form the spine of a town, nestling between two arms, both formerly tidal, of the Pembroke River. The castle appears almost to grow from the cliff below, which is pierced by a deep cavern, the Wogan. Rising from the opposite bank is Monkton Priory, which together with the castle is a visible representation of the twin symbols of medieval authority, the aristocracy and the church. The two mills that lay on either side of the castle in the Middle Ages have gone, but the town wall and two other medieval churches have survived to form an important part of the present townscape. Okay, I'm just going to have another drink. So this says even further back. So this picture is the Wogan Cavern, has been used as a place of safety for the last 12,000 years. Wow. Pembroke Castle stands on a site occupied, if not continuously, for the past 12,000 years. The Wogan, the vast cavern deep in the rock beneath the castle, was a shelter for cave dwellers during the Ice Age. Conditions of the Paleolithic period or Old Stone Age, who left examples of their stone tools behind. Occupation of the Wogan, if intermittent, continued into the warmer climate of the Mesolithic period or Middle Stone Age, possibly for up to 5,000 years. People returned to the security of the cavern in times of uncertainty and strife. Artifacts from the Late Bronze Age, a period of anarchy and warfare, have been found at other caves in the region. The Wogan may have been similarly used. Later shelters in the Wogan, from the end of the Roman occupation of Britain and the collapse of the established order, left evidence of their presence in the form of a coin hoard. So it was used with the Norman invasion, an Iron Age fort, possibly, and the Dark Ages. So it looks as though initially it will have been a timber castle between 1093 and 1204, like this. And yep, so this is the period when Henry the First was here. But I'm just going to get to the Tudory bit if I can. This is the first stone castle. The Invincible Castle. Plantagenet and the Tudor bowls. So here we go. This is the Tudor bit, and please forgive me while I have another drink. Okay, the Tudor mansion between 1454 and 1642. Pembroke Castle's decline was arrested temporarily by the arrival of a resident Earl, Jasper Tudor. His nephew, the future King Henry VII, was born within the castle walls in 1457. Jasper was the son of Queen Catherine of France, widow of King Henry V, and Owain Tudor, a Welsh squire who could claim descent from the 12th century Prince Rhys ap Gruffydd. As a half-brother of the Lancastrian king Henry VI, he received the castle and earldom of Pembroke in 1454. Britain was soon to be Britain was soon to be plunged into yet another civil war, the War of the Roses between the houses of Lancaster and York. Pembroke Castle played no real part in the initial stages, but it was used to reward loyal followers. During the brief Yorkist triumph of 1461-2, it was granted to William Herbert by the new king, Edward IV. The Lancastrian cause was finally defeated at Barnet in 1471. Jasper retreated to Pembroke Castle, where he was apparently besieged by the Yorkist forces. Wisely, he fled to France, taking the young Henry Tudor with him. Henry returned in 1485 to assert his claim to the throne, defeating Edward's successor, Richard III, at Bosworth. Pembroke was once more granted to Jasper. And this is his signature. This coffee is keeping me going. So here we have Henry VII as soldier and statesman, from a portrait by Michael Sitow by permission of the National Portrait Gallery and a statue at Cardiff City Hall. Okay, let's carry on. Jasper Tudor was a great patron of his castle and lordship of Pembroke, spending more time here than any other of its owners since William de Valence. He oversaw much renovation of the castle, adding a fine oriel window to the private chambers, a detached private mansion house, and formerly laid in the outer ward was also likely to have been his work. Upon Jasper's death in 1495, the county passed once more to the crown. Anne Boleyn was Marchioness of Pembroke for a brief period, but the castle was never again a private home or administrative centre. In 1536, administration of the county of Pembroke was finally brought under Crown control, ironically enough by the Tudor king Henry VIII. With his Act of Union, Henry effectively brought the Norman conquest to a close by abolishing the Marcher lordships and reorganising Wales along English civil lines. The old county of Pembroke formed the basis of a new larger county, Pembrokeshire. No longer an administrative centre and rendered militarily obsolete in the face of gunpowder, it appeared that Pembroke Castle now had no real role to fulfil. The Spanish Armada scare of 1588 prompted suggestion that it be refortified, but instead a chain of new forts was planned for Milford Haven. The castle was sold by King James I to a Welsh gentry family, the Prices of Gogardan in Cardiganshire. So, this is the castle in the Civil War, 1642 to 1648. I like that picture. It says Pembroke 3, the castle under the Valence lords may have looked like this. The castle restored 1880 to present. And seat of government. Early English Gothic. Attack and defence. A tour of the castle. Okay, let's read this bit. It's a little bit clearer to see as well. So, the inner ward, the stone defences. Pembroke Castle was at first much smaller than today. The outer ward was not added until later in the 13th century, and the masonry walls of the inner ward, begun under William Marshall I, circa 1210, were still the outer defences. Unfortunately, the inner curtain wall and inner gate were demolished probably in the 1640s, and the deep rock cut ditch in front of them has been filled in. The inner or horseshoe gate. The tour begins at the inner gate tower on the plan at the end of the guide. Oh, the plan at the end of the guide. Ah, here we go. The back. Only the outline now remains of the gatehouse built by William Marshall I. Some imagination is required to picture the tower and the ditch that formerly lay in front of it. However, the D-shaped plan of the tower can still be seen, with two doorways at right angles to each other, each closed off by a pair of doors. The tower was probably 2 stories in height, with a guard room over the gate passage. The inner curtain wall. As you face the inner gate from the outer ward, the line of the wall, which survives to only a few courses, can be seen away to your right. It was built at the same time as the inner gate and was originally much higher. The level of its parapet can be seen against the dungeon tower. A square garderobe turret at the north end was absorbed into the later 13th century domestic buildings. The Western Hall. As you pass through the inner gate, the Western Hall lies to your left. The long, vaulted, single-storey hall had a fireplace and latrine, and is lit by a large window on the west wall. The south wall features 2 arrow loops, which covered the cliff path to the inner gate until the outer ward was built. This was the main approach to the castle. A joint on the outer wall shows that the hall is later than the inner gate. It was probably added by one of William Marshall I's sons between 1219 and 1245, and with its self-contained features, it may have borne a lady's retiring room. The chapel. The chapel was built as a unit, with the Western Hall probably occupying the site of an earlier timber chapel. This may account for the Western Hall's narrow plan. Like the inner gate, it has not been rebuilt, standing only to a few courses. Its western gable, though, survives with the original west door. This was blocked in the later Middle Ages, when a new doorway was inserted through the north wall. The cross wall is also a later date. It may represent the base of a rude screen separating nave and chancel. Sockets for the roof timbers can be seen on the wall dividing the chapel from the Western Hall. I think it may be starting to lose my voice, but we'll carry on. Okay. The Great Tower or Keep. Still dominating the castle is the massive cylindrical Great Tower, one of the earliest, largest and finest of its kind in Britain. It was commenced by William Marshall I immediately upon his arrival in Pembroke in 1204. Of striking appearance, it is 25 metres high and 16 metres in external diameter. Its basal plinth or batter and horizontal offsets complement the bold simplicity of its limestone construction. The cutaway drawing above the medieval arrangement of its 5 stories. Oh, okay. The entrance was on the first floor and was reached from a timber stairway with an early form of sliding drawbridge. The flight of masonry steps is a reconstruction of those added during the Tudor period. The basement entry was probably also added in the 15th century. The 3 principal rooms were appointed as living quarters, with floors supported on massive timbers, whose sockets can be seen on the interior face. 2 of the rooms contain fireplaces, and each displays a fine 2-light window in the transitional Norman Gothic style. A further door on the second floor may have given access to a lavatory or garderobe, which discharged down the wall face. Oh, that's not very hygienic. Alternatively, the door may have led via a timber stair to the inner curtain wall. The point turret and north turret. Nature provided its own defence around the perimeter of the inner ward in the form of steep cliffs, but the marshals secured it with a low wall including 2 square turrets. From the great tower can be seen to the left the point turret, which contained a garderobe shaft, and the north turret. This is now a ruin, but can be seen to have had very thick walls, which are unlikely to have extended to a second story, so it may have carried a beacon or stone throwing machine. The Norman Hall. The Norman Hall is probably the oldest surviving structure in the castle, likely to date from the time of Richard Strongbow, circa 1150 to 1170, when the defences were still of timber. Despite much alteration, it still retains many features typical of a medieval first-floor hall. The main entrance was originally via a stairway up to one of the first-floor doorways, now leading into the Great Hall. A fireplace can be seen in the south wall at the same level, with a chimney that was rebuilt during the Tudor period. This floor provided the main residential accommodation within the castle until new domestic buildings were added in the late 13th century, when the Norman Hall appears to have become a private or guest apartment. The ground floor was always used for storage. The hall has been much rebuilt, including the windows at the east end. The ground floor entry facing the keep has also been rebuilt, but may be a fair copy in bold Norman style of the original door. The garderobe turret. The door visible at the east end of the first floor in the Norman Hall led into a garderobe that discharged into the former inner ward ditch. The garderobe was added by William de Valence in the 1280s, when the hall had become a private apartment, and forms part of a large square turret projecting from the inner curtain wall. The turret features another garderobe reached from the solar, this example being a 2-seater. I think I'm doing okay. Sorry, just went into a whisper there. Okay, so the Great Hall Block. Return to the Great Hall Block, a magnificent 2-storied building also added by Valence in the 1280s, doubtless to impress visitors and guests. The ground floor was taken up by kitchens. Note the large fireplace in the south wall, and was readily accessible from the storeroom in the Wogan. In the northeast corner is a doorway leading into yet another garderobe. This one was built by William Marshall I as a square tower flanking his inner curtain wall, and was absorbed into the later hall block Another garderobe lies above it on the first floor. And they like their garderobes. A new timber stair at the east end of the kitchen leads up to the level of the great hall itself and provides a good view down the hall's length. Large windows with early Gothic tracery overlook the river. The inner wall contains a fireplace and doors communicating with the apartment in the old Norman hall. The great hall is now roofless, but the moulded corbels for the supporting timbers can be seen on the side walls. Tabling may also be seen on the end walls, proving the roof to have been low-pitched and probably sheeted with lead. Turrets rise above roof level on all four corners, carried on external corbel tables. You are standing within a retiring room formerly divided from the east end of the Great Hall by a wall. This was originally part of the inner curtain wall. Large, fine windows look out over the outer ward. A doorway leads into Marshall's garderobe turret, circa 1210, with its early vaulted roof. This is the outer ward. The Henry VIII Tower. Let's read this bit. The outer ward towers were all primarily guard chambers and are similar in form, each having 3 stories, usually with at least one fireplace in the upper floors and a garderobe. This tower, however, is named after Henry VIII, who was born here in 1457. Wow. An event celebrated by a tableau in the first floor chamber depicting the newborn future king with his widowed mother, Lady Margaret Beaufort. A guard chamber may seem an unlikely location for a noble lady's nursery, but the tradition that Henry was born in the outer ward was already current in the 1530s. The second floor of the tower is vaulted. So I'm going to finish by just reading this little bit here. This is St. Anne's Bastion. Before you leave, cross the outer ward to St. Anne's Bastion, a massive defensive bulwark which received its name from the medieval chapel of St. Anne that formerly stood on the opposite bank of the river. It was probably added to the outer ward in the early 14th century by William de Valence's son Aymer. It incorporates another sally port and almost forms a castle in itself. Here also you will find lavatories and during the summer months a snack bar. The Barbican. You enter and leave the castle through the large semicircular barbican which was built over the infilled outer ditch by Aymer de Valence. It formed an additional defence to the great gatehouse, and like the inner gate, forced any attacker through a right angle. It is similar to the one he built at Goodrich Castle in Herefordshire. The design of both was ultimately derived from the former barbican at the Tower of London. It was extensively restored by J.R. Cobb in the 1880s and still forms the entrance to the castle. So, thank you for joining me for my first soft-spoken video since the famous tonsillitis. I hope that was okay. As you can hear, still not quite back to normal yet, but I reckon a few more days, be fine. As usual, thank you so much for popping by and watching and listening, and I hope you found that relaxing. This is Kate at the Library of Whispers saying, I shall see you very soon. Bye bye.